what is peace action?
Peace action, or what we would call peace building, is actually very practically simply about addressing conflicts effectively. It's an entire field, an area of science that has developed over the last 30 plus years around the world, where we deepen our skills for being able to understand what conflicts are actually about, and then take effective measures to address them, to prevent violence, to transform conflicts constructively, and to be able to better meet the needs and interests of all the parties involved.
Esto es La Inquietud con Garret Edwards, el lugar donde hay más preguntas que certezas.
La siguiente es una entrevista que hice en Tal y Cual por CNN Radio Rosario el pasado 9 de julio de 2022 a KAI Brand-JACOBSEN, Peacebuilder, un hacedor de paz. ¿Qué es esto? Entérense en la entrevista a continuación. Damos vuelta de página aquí en Tal y Cual por CNN Radio Rosario. En Rosario se ha estado llevando esta semana a cabo un congreso de mediación en el cual uno de sus oradores se llama KAI Brand-JACOBSEN, presidente de Peace Action, un instituto rumano que ha participado además al principio de la guerra en Ucrania con temas de refugiados, la verdad muy interesantes. KAI es considerado uno de los pioneros e innovadores en lo que tiene que ver con los temas de peacebuilding, de consolidación de la paz, de seguridad, con desafíos complejos, en conflictos y en crisis en el mundo de hoy por hoy. Vamos a mantener una conversación con él aquí en CNN Radio Rosario. La misma será en inglés, ahora voy a hablar un poco en inglés, vamos a cambiar. KAI, how you doing? Garret Edwards over here. It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm doing very well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And it's a pleasure to chat with you. So we just explained a little bit, but what is peace action?
Peace action, or what we would call peace building, is actually very practically simply about addressing conflicts effectively. It's an entire field, an area of science that has developed over the last 30 plus years around the world, where we deepen our skills for being able to understand what conflicts are actually about, and then take effective measures to address them, to prevent violence, to transform conflicts constructively, and to be able to better meet the needs and interests of all the parties involved.
That's really interesting, Kai. So I guess this is higher developed in Europe and in the English-speaking world. Is it as thoroughly studied as it should be in the Spanish-speaking world?
I'd say it's not as developed as it should be anywhere in the world at this point. Unfortunately, it has been an area which has been growing incredibly in the last 30 years. When I first started in the field in 1996 and I met one of the pioneers in peacebuilding, he said peacebuilding today is where medicine was in the 18th century.
Oh, that's incredible.
I would suggest that today we've caught up with medicine in about the 1950s. So we've covered a few hundred years in the space of the last 30. It is growing all around the world. The number of academic programs in the field has gone from about 30 in the early 90s to more than 500 today. We're beginning to see governments creating ministries and departments of peace, or local peace secretariats and peace offices around the world. But still, on a global level, we've actually been moving in the wrong direction in recent years. So for many decades, the rate of war in the world was decreasing. But since 2014, we've actually had war and deaths from war and armed violence going up every single year. And since 2016, more people have been dying from war than in any period in the last 30 years.
Kai, you've had the first-hand experience of the war in Ukraine and the conflict there. What was the thing that struck you the most when you arrived there?
There's actually a few things, and one of them that stands out is just the extraordinary response from people on the ground in Ukraine and around the world that are doing everything they can to help and to support people. And one of the sort of visual images that comes out is really poignant for what's happening in our world today more broadly. On the one hand, you have this authoritarian regime under Putin, and this massive, almost like a Leviathan, this state-driven effort to enforce upon people through war a solution that one man wants. And on the other side, you have the response of the multitude. You have millions and millions of simply citizens and people in Ukraine who are standing up to this and supported by an incredible solidarity and humanitarian response around the world. Now, in saying that, it's also incredibly important to point out that this war is not just because of Putin. Unfortunately, we've had a 30 years road that has brought us to this war, in which we have seen increasing confrontation and politics of confrontation adopted by parties on all sides. There were attempts at alternatives. There were moments of greater cooperation as well. But the overall broad dynamic, which we're seeing not only in Russia-US and Russia-NATO relations, but also perhaps even more worryingly, in China-U.S. relations in the South China Sea, is one of confrontation, increasing militarization, hardening of positions, and a failure to engage in intelligent and effective approaches to addressing conflicts, to prevent violence, and to create greater peace and security for all.
So as you're saying to us, Kai, it didn't come as a surprise when the conflict actually rose the way it did.
Not at all. And unfortunately, the warning signs have been there for quite some time. So we've been seeing in the world a gradual erosion of the rule of international law. We've been seeing increasing militarism and militarization. And all of this in the context of where we're also facing some increasing challenges, everything from climate change to the global COVID pandemic, economic inequalities. And at the same time that the crises and challenges that we are facing in our world are increasing, in some ways, the capacities of our states to handle them effectively and intelligently are decreasing. And this is why one of the things that we say is issues of war and peace are far too important to only leave in the hands of governments and military. It's extraordinary to see how in almost every other field of life today, medicine, technological innovation, the arts and culture, and human creativity, we have never had as much innovation, creativity, and human capacity as we do today. And then at the same time, you have this incredible anachronism, this failure of war, which is unable to address conflicts effectively and only makes them worse and increases human suffering. So what we look at is how we can overcome this anachronism and actually introduce practical, effective, and evidence-based approaches to dealing with conflicts effectively.
So when you got there, Kai, with your organization, Peace Action, what was it that you did to help with the situation? I know that you work with refugees, for example.
So our institute is the Romanian Peace Institute, and normally we only work anywhere in the world when we're invited. So we have to be asked to be there, and we work to support the peace-building capacities and peace processes that are led from people in their own communities and own countries. In the situation in Ukraine, though, we are the frontline state. We're in Romania. We're just a few hours from the Ukrainian border. And it was evident immediately when the war began, the overwhelming humanitarian need. So we stepped beyond our traditional role, and we actually opened the first collection center in Romania. The response from citizens in the community was incredible. We had thousands upon thousands of people that were bringing food, clothing, everything they could to help. And we began with humanitarian support both for refugees from Ukraine coming into Romania, but also providing critical life-saving medicines and food, constantly shipping them in convoys into Ukraine. And the war on the ground is worsening today. The number of people who are internally displaced within Ukraine is increasing, and there is dramatically little being done to ensure that their basic survival needs and food and medicine are being met, while a number of countries around the world are funneling billions of dollars of military equipment and into the war and its escalation. Not nearly enough is actually being done to meet the humanitarian needs of those who are affected on the ground.
You've been doing this, Kai, for over 20 years. Is this conflict comparable to any other you've experienced?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So it's comparable in terms of the signs which lead to it, the failed policies, the ineffective approaches. These are very consistent. Unfortunately, we quite often have a few men making decisions that drive countries into war, affecting the lives of millions. So those dynamics are similar. And then the polarization, the demonization of the other side, the fake news and propaganda, all of these are some of the pandemics, the twin pandemics of war. And of course, the human impact that it's having. Whether we speak about the continuing wars in Syria, Yemen, Libya, Mali, Afghanistan, or Ukraine, its impact on destroying lives, destroying economies, destroying societies is overwhelmingly consistent. This is why the World Health Organization has actually declared violence to be a pandemic. It is one of the leading causes of death amongst adults. And in the same way that we apply ourselves to build the field of medicine and to work to overcome illness and disease, that's what the field of peacebuilding is about in dealing with conflicts. But where it's different is that this is not only an issue in Ukraine or in Europe. This is an issue which brings tremendous global risk to all of us around the world. We've already been seeing the increases in food and fuel prices that are brought about as a result of the war in Ukraine and the sanctions on Russia. And that will bring incredible increased tensions in many parts of the world in coming years. We're also seeing the significant impact that it's having on climate change, where we are unfortunately stepping away from the direction of greater move towards renewables. And at least for the short term, you're having an increase in burning of coal and other non-renewable energy sources as a result of the war.
One last question, Kai. You've been in Argentina for the past few days. How have you seen the country?
It's a wonderful question. I would say in different ways. It has been a privilege to be here, and this event that has been organized in Rosario is truly extraordinary. The work of the Defensoria here over the last 30 years, and they're bringing together so many incredible experts and practitioners working in the field, not only from across Latin America, but from around the world, to share experiences, to understand what's being done, and to see how to do it better. But I have also listened, and I've heard from so many about the challenges that are being faced in the country at multiple levels. And one thing that perhaps at least 100 people from Argentina have told me is how they have gotten used to living with permanent crises. That's the experience that they feel. What I would love to see coming out of this extraordinary initiative of the Congress that's been organized in Rosario these days is really looking at how to advance practical solutions to the conflicts and the challenges that the city is facing. So we've seen increases in armed violence. We've been seeing over the last years the increase in drug-related violence in Rosario and in many parts of Argentina. But there are huge amounts of experiences from across Latin America and more broadly on the types of policies that work. So for example, I've worked extensively in Mexico and also earlier in Colombia. We know that policies like mano dura and increasing harsh law enforcement, harsh penalization, including of children and youth often that are involved, does not work. It brings war to the entire society. Instead of being a solution, it worsens the problem. We need governments to better understand the importance of evidence-based policy and practice. So things like introducing restorative justice, which addresses the actual underlying issues that have given rise to why a child or youth may be involved in crime, and works to help them re-enter society healthily, but is also much better at engaging with the needs of the victims and those who are affected. Or practices like introducing peace education into schools in the same way we all learn math or we all learn basic health and hygiene. Everybody has conflicts, but what we are not learning today is how to deal with them healthfully. So imagine if children in school were learning creativity, problem solving, healthy communication, and gaining the skills which are so important in dealing with conflicts, but also in every aspect of life. We've met with some wonderful institutions. We've spoken with leadership at both the city and the provincial level, and put forward ideas like improving multi-stakeholder collaboration to bring together schools, psychologists, social workers, mediators, youth organizations, urban planners, police, and others to look together at these problems and to identify practical and effective solutions that can help right here on the ground in Rosario.
Kai, thank you very much for the time you've lent us today, and we hope you have a great rest of the stay here in Argentina, and we hope we can speak in the future.
I look forward to it. Thank you so much as well.
Hablábamos con KAI Brand-JACOBSEN aquí en Tal y Cual por CNN Radio Rosario.
Esto fue La Inquietud con Garret Edwards. Síguenos en redes sociales y en www.edwards.com.ar.